I'm going to introduce myself a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the work that I've been doing and about that book over there, which I will explain. But before I do that, I just want everyone to realize that what the Night Office is and what it is doing is not common. Not every city in the world does this, and not every city in the world is doing this with the type of, let's say, energy that I'm seeing in Vilnius. So let's just recognize the benefit of even having something like this, let alone the benefit of what the Night Office is doing. And I promise, because I've done this in a bunch of places. So again, my name is Shain. I'm old. I live in London in the UK, but I grew up in Canada. In 2013, I founded a company called Sound Diplomacy. We are an economic consulting company that works on music and nighttime economy and culture all over the world. We've worked in about 130 cities in 30 odd countries. We run an events company called Music Cities Events that puts on conferences, which we have done in 12 countries. We've had maybe 30, 40,000 people come to them from 500 cities. And then I also now run a nonprofit called the Center for Music Ecosystems, which I'm working with the United Nations and other organizations on trying to incorporate music into how we solve big problems in the world. And just a little bit more about me. So I am rarely home. I travel a lot. I've worked all over the world. I've done a lot of work at the United Nations, delivering talks about why music matters. I've spoken to a lot of people who don't understand. And then luckily I get to speak in a room like this full of, culture advocates and music people. But I do a lot of property development talks too. So I'm doing the Urban Land Institute conference this year. I'm a writer. But most importantly, I'm getting my Lithuanian citizenship. My grandfather and grandmother are Lithuanian. My entire family is Lithuanian, from both sides, from Kaunas. I only discovered a couple of years ago that I had heritage here, and it goes pretty deep. And I've been doing all this digging and learning. Other than your language, it's very difficult, but I'll work on it. But it means even more that I'm here to me, because, without Lithuania, there'd be no me. So I wrote this book that came out in September. It was published in the UK by an independent publisher called Repeater, around the world by Penguin. It's over there. I'm not going to go over there and pick one up. And those are for sale if you're interested afterwards. And a little bit about the book. As you can see, I've been around the world doing this. I sold out the first pressing in 7 weeks. It's the first non-academic book written about music and city policy. So I wrote it in a way that I hope my mom would understand it. And she said she sort of does, so I'll take that as a win. But I've been traveling all over the world doing talks about the book, really trying to learn how cities are engaging with music and how, most importantly, music can be incorporated into wider city planning and wider city development and real estate. So the most important thing about this is that this is not about music. This is about everything. This is about Vilnius. This is about our economic growth. This is about making the city wealthier, making the city happier, making the city more welcoming. It just happens that we can do that through music, right? And in doing so, we can create more jobs in music, but also we can create more lucrative real estate development. We can make areas more vibrant in a way that doesn't kill culture. And we can do it in a way that everybody wins. And I'm going to try to explain that. But until then, I just want to share a few things that people have said about the book. People who are far more famous, popular, smarter, and better than me. Trust me on that one. If you look, Al Bell is more famous, smarter, and better than me in every way. He wrote, "I'll Take You There," so, Like, that's a pretty important song. He's also a really wonderful man. And thankfully, I've become friends with a mentor of mine, Richard Florida, and he thankfully said something nice. I didn't write it, I promise he wrote it. So I'm sure everyone here has had a glass of water today, right? If you haven't, shame on you, you gotta stay hydrated. It's really important to drink water, as I'm learning. But as I'm, oh, someone's drunk from this one. So, as I open this bottle and I take a sip of water, sometimes, you know, I've learned, but a whole host of things had to happen for this moment to happen, where I'm spilling the cap and drinking a glass of water. This, right, had to be manufactured, right? Water just doesn't come from anywhere. This water had to be bottled. It probably had to be filtered and cleaned, maybe desalinated. Obviously, when we all turn on the tap in our house and we pour water and we take a drink, so much has to happen for that moment to happen. Pipes just don't exist, right? They have to be built. We need an entire infrastructure to get water from wherever it is into our homes, into our taps. But when we're all drinking a glass of water, are you thinking about all of that? Are you thinking about any of the infrastructure, any of the quite complex infrastructure that needs to happen for you to have a clean glass of water? No, because clean water is only important when you don't have it. And I think the exact same thing happens when we think about music, because the exact same thing happens in this moment. Or this moment. Just take a second. How many jobs are in this picture? Right? I can count 15 to 20 just in this picture. I also can count 2 yellow hats, which I think is quite weird. 2 people had the same hat in this stock image. But obviously for that band to be on stage, stage had to be built. There's a sound person in the sound booth, probably 2 or 3 of them actually, at a show like this. There's security, there's cleaners, there's concessions, there's tour managers, there's riggers, there's caterers, there's hospitality, there's stagehands. I can continue to count. Even if we go back to a small grassroots music venue like this. Bartenders, security, marketing, accounting, legal. Someone had to make that guitar, right? A guitar was once a tree. Someone had to make those speakers and rig them. But none of us really are noticing, right, what is going on when these moments happen, because it doesn't matter. Because when you're immersed in the moment, that's all that matters. Because music, when we're listening to it, is all about our personal experience with it. But very few people have ever been inside one of these. How many people have been inside a recording studio? Less than half of you. Okay, that's fine. Very few people genuinely have any understanding of how music is made. It's like sausages, right? And when something that you can't see sometimes, but you can only feel, or where something that is ubiquitous, like water, is available to us for free or for cheap, on this thing, every single song ever made that pretty much I can listen to on this thing right now if I wanted to, right? Yet we don't think about all the jobs, all the skills, everything that goes into making music happen, and how if you kind of reverse engineer, like if you build that infrastructure back together, you can start to think about how music is not just music, but music is a significant wider economy in a city. And it's not just about the creation of music or the enjoyment of music, but it's about how these things, the songs and the jobs, translate into other parts of city development, right? Who here has ever exercised without music? Okay? I see one person put their hand up. Are you insane? I couldn't do it. Who here's been to a wedding or a funeral without music? Yeah, exactly. No, I think funerals, most of or singing, that is music. But music is a part of all of our lives. Yet we all, like water, take it for granted because it's always with us. We need to start to think about it differently. And if we think about it differently, we can see how it integrates into all manners of city development. And it's a really, really good time to think about it differently because music is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It is. It grew by, I think, 12.5% last year, right? It's worth, this is just some statistics. Music is now a $40 billion business around the world. But just to put that into perspective, the total value of music copyright is about 41-ish billion, something, yeah, there we go, 41.5 billion. Starbucks is worth 106 billion. So music is worth a third of one coffee company. Do we need Starbucks or all of music? So we're seeing a business that grew by 12.5% or something, 14%, but it's just beginning. It's an incredible opportunity in every city to leverage a growing economy, but leverage an economy that should be worth way more than it is. At the same time, we're all going to more concerts. We are. Often we're going to the bigger concerts, which is a problem because a lot of grassroots music venues are struggling. But just the economic impact of Taylor Swift is an incredible case study to demonstrate why music matters. Trust me. A lot of people just look at Taylor Swift and think, oh, everything is fantastic. But it's a great case study to demonstrate how music can drive people to spend money. But we can't take music for granted. So I just want to pose a couple questions, right, to all of you in whatever position. How many of you guys in this room are artists or creators? No? Okay, a few. I know it's Monday, but we can be less shy. How many are business owners? Okay, also being a creator is also a business owner. Being an artist is a business. Anyone in real estate? Okay, 2. All right. I'll speak to you two quite a lot today. A lot of this is about you guys. And I'm sure there are, I want to ask each of you, but I will afterwards. So here are some questions. Do we take intentional decisions related to music in Vilnius? Right? How is music incorporated into how the city attracts and retains talent? I'm seeing a lot of young people here, or younger than me, and presumably I think the city will want you to stay here and work and create business rather than leave. Are old laws trying to govern modern needs? And are we unnecessarily creating division? We have this kind of trope in this world where residents live over here and culture lives over here. And that actually does not make sense. You can live, and yet we want vibrant communities. Vibrancy means that you can live, work, and play in and around the same neighborhood. And often we see a lot of decisions get made on both sides that don't take into account the benefit of either side, of working together so that we can all make more money and we can all create more vibrant, safe neighborhoods and communities. Or are we making decisions, as we say, policy-based evidence making rather than evidence-based policy making? In a lot of the cities that we work, the decisions related to music are based on particular genres, right? Some genres receive a lot more money than other genres in public funding. Some of that's due to history. Some of that, I'll be honest, is down to classism and racism. But it doesn't make any sense. Why would one be more important than another, right? And most importantly, do we understand how music works? At its most basic level, how music works. How music makes money. How music can make money within the context of property development. How music can make money in terms of, a particular yields of land or how it can make money for a city? Do we genuinely understand? How many people, does everyone here understand how music copyright works? How literally you make money in music? And that's okay if you don't, because most people have no idea. And that's okay. Music is a very complicated business because you're selling something that you can't see for the most part. Yes, you have this point of sale of a concert or selling a vinyl or a CD, but the copyright behind that and how that makes money, that is what creates pensions, right? A song can be a pension if you understand how. And the way that cities calculate economic growth, economic impact, and make decisions about what businesses to invest in and what things to attract usually have a lack of understanding to how the wider creative economy makes money. We always joke, I do a lot of work in the US, even though I'm not American, and we joke that there's no such thing as economic development if it doesn't involve a shovel, right? Because a lot of people cannot understand anything economically worthwhile if you don't have to build it, literally, with a shovel. With music, if you have a successful song and you own part of that song, you can be earning money for 70 years after the death of the person who created it, right? So this is long-term capital, potentially. That's why loads of hedge funds are investing in music rights. Some of them not very well, but still loads of hedge funds are investing in music rights. How cities understand economic development and how the business community functions often is separate from how the music community functions. And it's just about understanding both sides. Because one thing that I have learned about successful cities, or cities that are built and maintained and governed for the people that live in them, is that the city that caters to the minority is a thriving city. Catering to a majority is easy. It really is. You need a football stadium, you need a shopping mall, you need a movie theater, you need McDonald's. And there's nothing wrong with any of those because I love them all. But the majority of people like the things that are most popular, right? It's hard to cater to a minority. It's hard to equitably cater to a minority, right? And a city that understands whatever that minority is. One example I told Mark over a coffee this morning in London is shisha bars, you know? Shisha bars are an important form of the nighttime economy for a certain section of the population. A lot of people don't drink, right? If you're Muslim, you don't drink. And one of the ways that particular cultures go out and relax is they go to a shisha bar and they smoke shishas. But in some parts of the world, it's seen the same way as other forms of drugs. Understanding the cultural impact and cultural benefit of the minority, helps create better nighttime economy and, in my case, music policy for the majority. It's easy to cater to the majority. And music is an incredible tool to do so because music has been catering to the minority for years. That is why we all have gleaming concert halls full of symphony orchestras. Symphony orchestras are for the minority. They're just for a particular side of the minority. Not everybody likes the symphony. I do. I'm pro-symphony. But I know that. A lot of people like hip-hop and only like hip-hop or metal or country music or EDM. I don't really care what music you like, right? I just care that all music is treated equally as much as possible because every minority is important. And no one is more important than anybody else in a place, if a place is going to be developed in a way that benefits everybody. And this is so important when it comes to land use planning. And I'm going to talk about a couple of examples. As I've learned here, Vilnius doesn't have zoning, which is probably a good thing. Zoning is complicated. But how your land use is planned is hugely important when it comes to really understanding how music can be incorporated into the future of Vilnius's development. Because Land is one of the only finite resources that we all share. There's only so much of it to go around, right? There's no more land. We have what we have. Fortunately, it's the same with water and air. Music is, to me, an infinite resource. We can always make more of it. But how we use land, how we market land, and how we're creating a place that attracts workers, but also a place where we have where we have homes that are close to amenities, that are safe, that can support growing families. That is at the same time as important as understanding the cultural infrastructure around those places, right? I think we always say and I think I've potentially written it in this presentation, but a city to me is not just a place to live, but it's a place to live for. And one thing that we do is we put culture on this side where culture is not economic. Culture is the thing that we do after work. It's the thing that we do for fun. Not realizing that in most places, it's obviously the culture that makes land more valuable, right? And when culture makes land more valuable, for example, a nightclub in an industrial area or whatever, and then that industrial area, because it's an industrial area, is ripe for development. Always industrial areas get redeveloped into commercial or commercial and residential, mixed use as we say. Often poor land use planning leads to this dichotomy where, okay, we have offices and we have restaurants and we have homes, but we can't have nightclubs and music venues, where that's not true. What is required is an understanding of how land should be better planned and how we can incorporate cultural uses alongside residential uses. There's been people living above music venues in Europe for hundreds of years, right? There are music venues in residential areas all over. But one thing that we have learned is you only want a vibrant neighborhood until you have kids and want to go to bed at 10 p.m. And the most important thing to protect the success of that area, but most importantly, and I'll just be honest, to make more money, because that's what it's all about as well. We all have to make more money. How do you make more money on residential development? You make the buildings better and you sell them for more. And then the land yield goes up. You do that by building places or refitting places in a way that is understanding of the local community. So if there is a music venue there, maybe that music venue may need some refurbishment as well. You never know. But having an understanding of all uses in an area means, to me, that they can all coexist. And through talking, through compromise, through understanding, and I'll get to this, through data, we can create vibrant neighborhoods that are inclusive of existing culture. And at the same time, will become more expensive, because that's just the way it is. Hopefully, they'll become more expensive in a way where there's the right protections in place to support those who already live there. But that's a city regulation, right? That's not the job of real estate developers. So I'm sure you're asking, well, who am I? What's happened anywhere? Why should you listen to me? I don't know. I'll be, But I'm hoping I can convince you with a couple case studies. So has anyone been to Huntsville? That's okay if you haven't. Okay. All right. Huntsville is where NASA is. I'm sure you've heard of NASA. So when they say Houston, we have a problem, most of the time it's actually Huntsville we have a problem. It's just there is a command center in Houston, Texas. But all the rockets were built and are built in Huntsville. Huntsville was struggling to recruit people to live there, because why would you live in Huntsville if you can live in Silicon Valley, right? Because Silicon Valley, I think there's just a lot more to do. That's obviously where the tech world is. So the city took an intentional approach to incorporate music directly into how it markets itself to key workers. It says, we want scientists, we want engineers, but we're only going to get scientists and engineers if there's something for them to do after 6 p.m. and if this is a nice place to live with things to do. So they didn't say we just want scientists and engineers, but they want artists and musicians as well. So they commissioned, we did a piece of work for them where we produced a piece of data articulating the music ecosystem in the city. How much everything is worth, where it is, where the challenges are, social, economic, and so on. And the city, of all cities in the United States, has done more for music than any other one that I know. So that venue there, that opened last year. It's called the Orion Amphitheater. Orion, obviously, space exploration. It was named one of the best new venues in America. It's an 8,000 capacity amphitheater. And trust me, having an 8,000 capacity amphitheater in northern Alabama in the United States is quite something. But also, one of the things I'm most proud of is we created a music instrument library, similarly to a library. Buying a musical instrument is not accessible for everybody, right? It's expensive. And having a way to have musical instruments available to the community en masse creates more opportunities for kids and whoever to access musical instruments. There's over 5,000 instruments now in this library, 2 full-time curators who take care of the instruments. And we've done all sorts of things, including partnerships with NASA. And it's now known as #2 place to live in the United States. Damn you, Boulder, Colorado, as we always say. It's a nice place. But also, I'm trying to find examples as well that aren't London or New York, because who cares what London and New York are doing in Vilnius, I feel. London is a city of 10 million people. And London has 33 local governments, some of them bigger than Vilnius. So I'm not going to compare. And I worked as an advisor in the mayor's office in London for 3 years on the music policy. But there's a chapter in the book about that. Cardiff is a capital city. It's about the same size as Vilnius. They've hired a full-time music officer. They've also changed their planning law so that any development that happens next to an existing music or entertainment or bar, the owners of that music, entertainment, or bar are able to comment on the application and engage with the developer. Not to say don't do it, but to say maybe here's what we do, here's our schedule, here is how we can work together. And we've been able to stop 3 venues now from closing down because of new real estate developments next door. One of them was quite simple. The developer just moved the balconies to another side because the balconies were overlooking the venue. That doesn't make sense, so just move to the other side of the building. And I know that sounds simple, and I know it's not, but that was the solution there. But the city has taken a real intentional approach. They also have a music board that is a statutory consultee. So the most important thing, and why I love the night office as well here, is that these things need to be codified into cities. If you codify something, that means when that board says something, then the city council has to respond, rather than it just being an advisory board that says things that no one listens to. Belfast is another city that's done this. Another, I guess, capital city, similar size to Vilnius. They're now UNESCO City of Music, which is what it is. It's a brand. You make of it what you want. Tallinn is a UNESCO City of Music. But the city has done a full reworking of its zoning and its city code to legalize street performance. It wasn't legal there, for example. And they have also hired a full-time music officer. One city that's really gone into music in terms of creation is Lausanne. Lausanne, we did the strategy there. It's a really nice city if you've never been. Switzerland has lots of lakes. They invested in a city-funded music hub. So a music hub, it was a city-owned building. They put some recording studios in, rehearsal space. They hired some industry professionals to teach and so on. But they've also done it in a way where they prioritize the creation of new music. And they're doing it in a way that anyone who records in the Lausanne Music Hub has their music professionally registered. That's really important. One of the problems in the music industry is putting the wrong metadata on your songs so that when they get played somewhere, you can't track. And if you can't track it, you can't get paid. And this is really important when you're growing up into the music industry or you're making new music, that the metadata, the data that is assigned to your music is properly coordinated. And this is something that a lot of people do not understand. They'll just make music and they'll put it online. And I'm like, well, don't do that. You know, would any other business would make sure that whatever they're making is properly registered and protected. And having a city that understands that that is necessary for their music economy to be successful is really, really fantastic. And Lausanne is one of the leaders in Switzerland. It's the only strategy as well that we wrote in French, so I've never read it. But if you speak French, it's online. I'm one of those bad Canadians who never learned French. I grew up on the wrong side of Canada. So I guess you're asking, well, what do we do? I think there's so much opportunity in a city like Vilnius. I don't just say that because of my emotional connection to Lithuania. I say that because Vilnius is, to me, the perfect size for it is small enough to get stuff done and big enough for people to care. And that is a unique size, where cities like New York and London and San Francisco, all of which we've worked in, it's, you know, it's like pushing a boulder uphill. And I think that also with the young population, multilingual population, and your unique geographical position, there's so much opportunity here. So what do we do? First off, the most important thing is to collect data. And I know that there's very little data here. How many music venues do you have? What are they? What's their capacity? How many music schools? How many music teachers? How many bands? You can measure that. How many businesses? What are the businesses worth? Where are the deficiencies? Where are the problems? Where are the challenges? Each one of you in this room has your own definition of that, I'm sure. And all of them are probably valid. But are they evidence-based or are they emotional? Or a bit of both? Most important thing is to collect data. And most cities do not do this. And collecting data is not hard, but it takes time and money. And arguing for time and money is hard. And it needs to be done in a way that it doesn't prioritize any genre or any discipline or anyone in particular. Because collecting data should not be political. It should just be collecting data. What you do with it then becomes political. And in that way, you can measure your economic impact. And it's so important because, unfortunately, in the world that I live in, people like to know how much things are worth to then care about them. And most cities do not know how much their music economy is worth. It's usually worth more than you think, because music is everywhere, right? If music is everywhere, then it's got to be worth something everywhere. And really thinking about your land use policy. I know there's a huge redevelopment of the train station and the area around the train station. And there's a number of plans to expand residential units in the city center. And all of this is great, right? But these decisions can be made either top down or bottom up. And usually it's best if they're made top down and bottom up. But it starts with data and with understanding that a land use policy has to work for everybody and catering to the minority as well as catering to the majority. Importantly, and I'd like to change the language, nothing pisses me off more than the starving artist thing. Like, it really, really pisses me off. I get angry because this isn't about funding. This isn't about, oh, this is, you know, doing it because it's a nice thing to do or it'll make us feel good. Pardon my French, I don't fucking care. I don't care if it makes you feel good. This is about making money. That's it. To me, it's about making money. You can do good and do well at the same time. And music grew by 14.5% last year. We should be investing in it. What other business grew by 14.5% last year? You know, maybe a couple of years ago, PPE grew by more than that. But, you know, masks. But I truly believe that that music is this incredibly untapped economic driver for all cities. We just have to understand it. And it's something that's here. It's something that you don't really need to do anything about because that's already happening. It just needs to be slightly understood better and reorganized. Because we need to start building in cultural infrastructure rather than bolting it on, right? Most cities bolt on music policy. Oh, let's build the development and then let's get some bands on. Or, let's design that public park and then we'll have some concerts. Not thinking about the literal infrastructure, cabling, for example, electricity, so on, that would enable for music to thrive and to make more value of that place. We say if we start building it in, not only will we save money, but we'll create more value in the future. And I apologize for swearing. Sometimes I swear. I felt bad there. And I truly believe that positive mutual interest benefits self-interest. We're all self-interested. If you're, the goodness of our hearts always comes to me with the parentheses. Sorry to say, all of us have a self-interest in one way or another, right? And I do believe that after COVID, our self-interests have hardened. A lot more people are more protective of what they have. And I think that's a response to trauma. And I think that's a response to this world that we're living in. But I believe that understanding, caring, and having an evidence base that promotes mutual interest is actually in each of our self-interest. The more that we understand our music economy in Vilnius, the more we can all make money out of it. The more data that we have, the better decisions can be made about what to invest in or what to put in that ground floor or how to use that slightly lower valued basement, or something like that. Or what genres may be worth exploring and investing in from a city marketing perspective, so on. In addition to klezmer, obviously. I know klezmer. Klezmer to me is still one of the historical genres of Vilnius. But so I'm guessing is hip hop and metal and country and EDM and everything else and classical. And most importantly is having a true understanding of music. Understanding how it works and how music rights work, how intellectual property works, and that intellectual property is property. I always feel like we focus on the word intellectual and we kind of forget the word property. And that the more songwriters, the more copyright that's held in Vilnius, the more pensions will be supported, the more families will be supported, the more investments that can be made. And this isn't just about live music. This isn't just about what we can see. This is also about the infrastructure that makes music happen. And music can make tons of money in places that very few of us ever realize or can see. And, I was honored that the mayor came. That's really important because every city kind of lives or dies through its leadership. And what I see here, obviously with Mark, I think Mark deserves a big, round of applause from everybody for his tireless work forever. So I'm going to do it. You've been doing this for a long time. And trust me, I see it from the outside as well. We've both spent years screaming into the void. But now it shows that just by having this event and by welcoming me here, which I greatly appreciate, that you're starting to sing from the same hymn sheet. And I have to say, it doesn't matter what genre you like. It doesn't matter what sector you're in, is that investing in music as a whole will benefit you. But it comes with data and evidence first. And I think that Vilnius is in this fantastic moment after COVID, where you have new leadership that is singing from the same hymn sheet. You have this night office that has 4 staff. That's a lot for a night office. That's more than most night offices. It's more than New York. New York has 2. New York City has 2 in their night. Just to say, London has 3 in full nighttime economy office. 3.5. Still not 4. So just take that as one, as one thing. And treat this as an incredible opportunity. I'm not saying that music should be made special This is one of the things. I want to be very clear about that. Music is only special individually. When I say the word music, it means something different to every single one of you. And that's incredible, because music has had a personal impact on each one of you, I'm sure. I'm sure everyone remembers what your first gig was, right? Or something that reminds you of a loved one, or when you fell in love, or of a memory of someone who's no longer with us. I surely have it. A song came on. So, a song came on the radio a couple days ago that reminded me of my grandfather, Lithuanian grandfather from Kaunas. He had Alzheimer's. I only knew him for a couple of years before he didn't know me. And from when I was about 7 till when I was 13 when he died, he didn't know who I was. But I distinctly remember singing Sinatra with him. Because he remembered that because of the power of music. And I don't want us to forget about that. But I also want us to see that music is this incredible tool to influence city planning, city development, and economic and social growth. Because everyone will make more money this way. And I know this sounds a bit crass. I was told that Lithuanians don't like flowery language. You just want me to get to the point. This is my point. This is an economic argument, guys. That's it. Music is not that expensive to invest in over a long period of time. It's quite a high investment at the beginning. I'm sure some of you have created music festivals. Music festivals are money pits the first 3, 4, 5 years. But once you stabilize costs, if you're successful, they can make you a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to make a record. It costs very little money to administer a record over a long period of time. And the best real estate developments, the best town centers, the best public parks are those that build in music in a way that makes sense for them, rather than bolt it on or try to build alongside something without thinking of who your neighbors are and how you can work together with them. Because, there we go, sorry. I like this. Because if we, if we share the same beat together and we turn up the volume, I guess it's a bit, together, and we also understand the economic value of that and the technical skills involved in that, we can create a city that grows equitably, that supports the minority and the majority, and that does so in a way where whatever music you like, whatever you like to do, whether you like to go out or whether you like to stay in, that this is a city that caters to you, and this is a city where music is part of how Vilnius sees itself now and how Vilnius wants to see itself in the future. Because, again, music, I would say, alongside food, it's one of the only things that we don't need to live, but we would all struggle to live without. Think about that. So why do we just treat it as I say, a nice to have rather than a need to have? Why do we think of it passively? Because in my book, I have to go back to my book and promote it. It's over there. And they're heavy, and I had to check a suitcase to come here. So if you're interested, I would, I take card payments on my phone. It's easy. And I would happily sign it, and I would be ever so gracious and thankful. But the first chapter of my book, it's titled, "If it doesn't have a policy, it doesn't exist," or something like that. And what I mean by that is when there is no music policy in a city or no nighttime economy policy in a city, which Vilnius didn't have for a long time, then it gets governed by other things because it has to be governed by other things. So music then becomes something around public order and nuisance, or environmental health and noise, or housing, or tourism, or health, or business, right? All of those are policies where people are paid to do stuff related to those policies. Music is part of all of those things, right? It's, music impacts housing. Music impacts economic development. Music impacts police, It does. And noise. It impacts tourism, obviously. But if there's no voice to articulate music in and of itself as its own thing, or nighttime economy, if it doesn't have its own policy that speaks to everything, that articulates with everything, that works with everything, then it doesn't exist in policy. And I'm going to end with one of the slides in the previous presentation, which obviously I didn't understand a word of. But I see you guys opened a new grassroots music venue. And I saw the word grassroots music venue. Everyone's heard of this term, right? Grassroots music venue-ish? Okay, Mark is saying ish. Okay, no, that's fine. So now this is important. This is a term that was invented. I was part of the world where it happened. The reason is, so when I was working in the mayor's office in London, which, again, it's a whole chapter in the book, so I'm not going to bore you. But between 2005 and 2015, so 10 years, 1/3 of London's music venues closed down, right? About 90 venues closed for a variety of reasons. But when we, and this is the royal we, a bunch of people led by this amazing organization called the Music Venue Trust, which is a charity to represent music venues, when they tried to articulate the problem to ministers and to government, they didn't understand what we were saying because the word music venue didn't mean anything to them. A music venue was the back room of my local pub, or it was the O2, you know, our arena, or it was the Royal Albert Hall, or it was the Opera House. The word music venue was whatever that minister of parliament or city councilor thought it was in their head, because that was their valid definition of what they knew a music venue to be. So to try to articulate that there was a problem and it needed to be solved, the Music Venue Trust, the Mayor of London's team, and a few other people created a term and a definition called grassroots music venue. There's a definition online. Google it, right? The essence is live music, primarily original music, 3 or 4 times a week, under 1,500 capacity. And we use this thing called the elephant test, right? If it looks like an elephant, it's probably an elephant. When we define grassroots music venue, it started to get talked about in minutes at city council. And then ministers started to talk about it in parliament. And then it started to mean something. And then when it starts to mean something, then you can say, you know, that thing is what needs help. That specific thing that we have defined, that is a music policy. Without it, we wouldn't have been able to pass what's called the agent of change principle in the UK, which I'm hoping you will pass here, which simply means that any new development next to an existing cultural venue or any new cultural venue next to an existing development has to be built to respect what's already happening, i.e., if the apartments are built next to the venue, the apartments have to be soundproofed. If the venue is built next to the apartments, the venue has to be soundproof, right? That's now national law in the UK. It doesn't work all the time, but it's national law. And also, it's been used by the National Pig Farming Association because people moved next to pig farms and complained about the smell. Same thing. Don't move next to a pig farm. Pigs smell. Music venues have music, right? And that is now national law in the UK. That was only passed. It started in London and then it worked its way up to our national planning law because a definition of the problem was created. We built a policy around a problem. We articulated what that problem was. And then we argued, here's how you can fix it. Are things better? Maybe. Venues are still closing in London. But the Music Venue Trust has created a property company to buy the dirt under venues now. That's one of the problems in the UK is you can own the building but not own the dirt. That's a big problem. Here too? Okay. And to buy the dirt under the venue means that you can choose what happens inside the building. And often in our world, we value the dirt more than we value what happens inside the building. Music Venue Trust has bought 2 venues already, saved them from closure because they bought the dirt. They raised money from everybody. They had a crowdfunder, but they also raised investment. And now they have a property company called Music Venue Properties that is buying the dirt. That started because we defined what a grassroots music venue was. It became popular. We said, here's a problem that we need to fix. We tried to fix it. Some success, some not, like everything. And now I see it on a presentation in Vilnius. So we can all do this together. We just have to think differently about music. We have to think differently about its role in our community. And we have to think that, again, we are all partners in this, regardless of where we work, what we like, and where we come from. And on that note, again, I think I'm going to take some questions. If you have some questions, or you can yell at me or whatever you want. If you want to get a hold of me, that's my email address. I do respond, I promise. Sometimes takes me a couple days. Feel free, if you want any of the studies that we've worked on with sound diplomacy or the center, a lot of stuff is on our website or on my website as well. And you can text me if you want. I'm not as good at texts. I'll be honest. I get a lot of them, but I'm good on email because I can compartmentalize it. So on that note, I want to thank Mark, who's been a dear friend for quite a while now, and Laura and Gabby and Ruta, the whole team at and Emmy, the team at the Vilnius Night Office. It's amazing to see what the Vilnius Night Office has accomplished in such a short period of time. I know that it's new. I know that a lot of people are not yet aware of what it's doing. That's normal. I promise that's normal. But this is an incredible opportunity. Everyone needs to be supporting the Vilnius Night Office, lobbying for it, making sure that it is taken as seriously as any other office in the city. Because what it's doing is as serious as any other office in the city. So, thank you again from the bottom of my heart, from someone who is trying to learn and become as Lithuanian as you'll allow me to be. Ačiū. Thank you. Okay. Any questions or comments? I don't know how this is going to work. Is a mic or? There's a mic there. Someone always has to go first. Okay. Amazing. I love the confidence.
All right.
And just please introduce yourself.
So, hi. My name is Vilnius. I came here with the invitation of Gabby. So thanks a lot. And super great presentation. Very energetic and optimistic. My question to you is a little bit related to what we're doing here in this row. We're part of community radios here in Vilnius, like independent nonprofit organizations. And do you have any experience with community radios from other cities?
Mm-hmm.
Some data maybe, some good examples.
Yep.
Yeah, we'd like to invite you over sometime if you're free.
Yeah. First, make sure that we get in touch after. I know like the guy who created community radio in the United States is a really good friend of mine. Company's called Paragon, if you want to see. He helped create KEXP, for example, and KCRW. I think when it comes to community radio, it's all about trust and time. That's what I've learned, is you have to build the trust of the community, that you represent them in whatever way, and that just takes time. And from our side, it's prioritizing as much as you can local music, or having shows dedicated to local music, and having speakers from the local community, and measuring the work that you do. So keeping tabs on at least how many people that you're engaging and who you're engaging, so you can start to demonstrate the social impact. It's hard to demonstrate economic impact, and why would you? You're a community radio station. It doesn't really matter. But to demonstrate the social impact, it's all about really telling the story of what you're doing while you're doing it. And I'm happy to introduce you. There's a really great new community radio station that I did a talk in Canada as well, called Midtown Radio, that you should check out. And I can introduce you to them too. They're, I guess, quite similar, nonprofit, quite small, aligned with a university. But, yeah, it's hugely valuable community radio. It's one of those things that we, like anything, I guess, what Joni Mitchell says, right? When it goes, then that's when you realize how important it is. So everyone, it's always worth tuning in. And make sure you have a really good live streaming system, global live streaming system. My favorite radio station in the world is a community radio station, WWOZ in New Orleans. Anyone has heard of it? If you like music from New Orleans, you know, that kind of music, WWOZ, it's the best. Streams 24 hours a day. It sounds, I'm sure, exactly how you imagine it to sound if it's a radio station from New Orleans. Also an interesting city. We did their music strategy, also a city with challenges, despite all the musical history there.
Any other questions? I actually have one. As you mentioned, a couple of different cities right now. I was interested how come the advancement in music ecosystem and policy in these different cities differs so much. And from your experience with working with these cities and the city policymakers, what are the main catalyzers that a city starts to work on this? Is it the people from the...
It's always an advocate. Everything always starts with an advocate. There is no city that we have ever worked in that there isn't a human being who is dogged and relentless and loves to bother people. So, you know, I wonder who that is. But no, every city has one of those. And when a city loses that person or that person moves jobs, often it creates issues. A few cities that we've worked in, that person has moved jobs and it's made it difficult. Always starts with an advocate. And a dedication to data collection. Because data collection is boring, it's not sexy, it's not, but there's only so far you can go without it. There's only so far the emotional argument will take. And also when you're making an emotional argument, then you're relying on someone's emotional response. And that's not a very good political thing to do. Also making it not political, because governments come and go. They are from the right or the left. It doesn't really matter with music. Like, there are reasons to support music, whether you believe in left of center politics or right of center politics, it doesn't really matter. So those cities, the people who understand that this isn't political, make it political in whatever way you need to during an election campaign, but it's not. And then I always joke, but one of the most powerful economies that we have is what we call the shaming economy. You know, take that. Is sometimes you have to ruffle some feathers to get things done. But when you ruffle feathers, do so with data to back up why you're doing so. Or you're just being mean, and there's no point in being mean. So, but there's no secret. I think what's missing here is data, because data builds seriousness. And how can you... It's very, very hard to advocate or prove that something is worth money if you have no data to prove that it's worth money. Then we're just saying, you know, invest in music because music is great. That's not a good argument. Thank you. Guys, everyone still with me? Awesome. Well, thank you. It's a Monday. This is amazing. Hello.
My name is Vidmandas. I'm a programmer of 2 venues in the city, electronic music related. I wanted to ask one non-data related question, which is a reputation of the nightlife. Because, you know, you cannot back it up by data. And we always face a huge problem, a challenge maybe, because we even have an anecdotal story where one of the agencies of the municipality, the tourism agency, approached us as a club, as an organization, and asked us to do an event. We had an Vilnius anniversary last year, 700 years. They say, we really like this picnic you're doing outside, because that's the most popular picnic, summer picnic in the city. You know, DJs free of charge, whatever, really nice atmosphere. And they said, we'd like you to do this on this special occasion, but can you take out your club name, because it's called Open Club. So they really like what we do, but they don't like the name. But if you understand, it's kind of broader thing. We don't sell open, of course, it's just a name, you know, and the name comes just from the restaurant upstairs, because it's a Bruce Lee restaurant and it's an Asian fusion joint. So it's just called Opium. We have kind of Eastern flair to that. Any experiences of how you fight this?
That's a tricky one. Yeah, no, you know, that's a tricky one. That's a very annoying coincidence, I would say, of all things. No, well, I understand from both. I understand from both perspectives. I think that it's a bit silly, but I do understand the politics of it. I think, one option is coming up with a brand together that is supportive of the venue, that is representative of the venue, and then charging them for that. So you say, fine, we won't use our name, but if we're going to create a new one, then we charge you a license, and we do it in such a way that it's a financial benefit for you to do it. I guess that's the pragmatic me in saying that. But certainly, you're touching into a more, public order historical challenge of society's relationship with drugs, which has nothing to do with the club. I know that, but it's just a coincidence of the name. And so I don't have an answer for you, but I'm hoping, I'm the eternal pragmatist. I'm like, okay, well, what is a way that you can benefit from the situation? And benefiting from the situation could be, okay, well, maybe there's an alternative brand. We can have a play on words or make some fun out of it, but do it in a way that charges a premium for that service.
Maybe I could reframe it a little bit, because this kind of name situation is a very specific thing.
Yeah, like it's hard.
Do you have any experience of just nightlife kind of reputation in general? Because there was a really nice thought by Dan Dumont, one of the London promoters, to say because for a lot of people, nightlife is a dirty thing,
Yeah, that's
it's like,
yeah,
people
yeah.
are messed up, the people walking out of the opera house look different than the people walking out of the club 8 in the morning.
Yeah, we have we get this all the time. This happens everywhere. So we have a saying at Sound Diplomacy when we're doing our work is, everyone has the same unique problems. Like it happens everywhere. This is a bigger societal issue, which is down to history and race and class and all sorts of why club culture specifically is not seen as legitimate higher art culture. And I think that it's getting better, but it's going to take another generation to get to that point where we look at opera. And again, it's amazing because most operas are about like murder and beheading. Who here likes opera? Most operas are or incest. Like operas are often about pretty horrible things. That's why they're quite cool to me. But yet there's often 100 years where it's been sanitized in our brain. I think one of the only ways that we can continue to fight against that, and maybe I go back to it, one of the most successful ways I've done it is through just hard economic data, but also through, essentially trying to demystify what a club is. Because most people who make decisions to regulate nightclubs have never been inside one. And a nightclub is one of the most heavily regulated places on earth. If you think about it, right? It's more regulated than an airport. Every little thing in a nightclub is regulated. Where you put your coat, where you smoke, how you drink, how often you can be there, how you get in, what you can take in, what you can and can't do. It's so highly regulated. Yet we don't talk about this as, okay, well, what can we learn from a place that safely manages people? And I find that I'm not sure I have the answer, but I think we just have to continue to talk differently about what a nightclub is. That on one side, it's a community center. On another side, it's an innovation hub, because it is. It's where businesses are incubated and innovated. And it's also a place that, that when well run, arguably is one of the safest places in the world to be, because it's so highly regulated. It's way more regulated than a sports stadium that we put 80,000 people into and then give them lots of drugs through alcohol, which is a drug, right? So I think that it's just about telling a different story over a longer period of time and backing it up with data. And I know that's not the best answer, but it does work over time. How club culture was seen 10 years ago compared to what it's seen now, it is better. Trust me, there's way more people working in the nighttime economy now than there was 10 years ago. Hundreds and hundreds more cities have night offices. In 2015, when I started doing this, there was like, other than the Netherlands, which is its own thing, there was maybe 20 or 30 cities around the world that did this. Now there's well over, I think, between 300 and 400. So, but I'm the optimistic pragmatist. I'm always looking for, how things are getting better.
Hey, I wanted to ask, have you seen any cases where such night offices begin to serve the interests of business or politicians rather than the cultural sector and local communities, basically corruption? And what
Yeah, of course.
risks do you see?
Yeah, if a human being runs it. So, of course. Night offices tend to fall into 4 categories in my head, right? One is driven by club culture and creators, I guess you would say, but also some of those are business owners. Second would be purely regulatory. A lot of American ones are like in police and, in the Office of Regulatory Affairs. Third is I think what London does, which is what is more about life at night rather than, about everything, about logistics and hospitality and hospitals and minicabs, as well as club culture. And then the fourth one is, a lobbying organization, right? One of the things that I think is a challenge is a lot of night offices get set up and do not define what they are. It's okay to be a business lobbying organization, obviously. The Nighttime Industries Association in the UK is a business lobbying organization. They lobby for their members. But they aren't a night office in that sense, right? So, the corruption comes from blurring the lines, where someone comes to the office expecting to be treated a certain way, but that's not the objective of that office. It's set up for a different reason. So one of the things that I think that that we in this world have to get better at is to better define what we are and be honest about it. And that will reduce corruption. Corruption now comes through that blurring of the lines because, yes, you can articulate that you are supportive of arts and club culture, but be funded by 2 companies. That happens. Or you can say that you're pro-business, but simply be a regulatory vehicle to make money for the city. So it's not really about people being openly corrupt in that sense, because that will always happen. It's more about being honest about who we are. And I think the night office here has to do that like any other, of what it is. And you can be a bunch of those things if you want. You just have to articulate that and separate church and state. But everything is corruptible, unfortunately.
I also maybe wanted to tell that Shain is here until tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. And tomorrow on our agenda is visit to the city, municipalities. So Shain is going to be speaking to the municipality staff and other staff from other municipalities, organizations. And we're also meeting the developers by an invitation of Vilnius architects. So this is also like a town hall opportunity to share your stories that you think would be worthy bringing now, or got Shain a little bit later? So.
What roots is that?
Hi, thanks so much for the presentation. My name is Aista. I work in a music label that's actually based in London, but we have a little office here in Vilnius, and my little job here is to try to sort of, not export, but just help artists release music locally here too. My question is about music scenes that kind of get created in cities and can be recognized and by the communities. The what was it? Huntsville example was very made me think that in that case the city kind of tried to manufacture a music scene.
Not exactly.
Yeah, but
There was a music scene there.
Right.
Yeah.
So the first thought for me was, it's very interesting what kind of musicians would have moved there, and especially if there's like a huge venue built and that's like 8K capacity, that kind of already favorites types of artists that can play there or be booked there. And
Yeah.
so basically my question is, how would any, like, and you mentioned the genre, that every genre should sort of like not have any favoritism. So how have you seen any examples of how that's being looked at, and sort of how's this working in the world right now?
Yeah, well, government shouldn't try to create a music scene anywhere. That's why would we do that? Music scenes develop organically, and one person's music scene is different from another person's music scene, right? No, I'm talking about with Huntsville, it was really about infrastructure. It was build it to support those who are already here, and hopefully more will come, and more have come. But that venue, as part of the contract to run the venue, they have to do 200 free events a year for the public as part of the deal. And they do it in other parts of the venue, not the big. They do a couple things on the big stage, but there's other areas that are like mini venues. But that's one of the things. I think that's a misunderstanding with this, and that's totally fair. And probably my fault is this whole thing is not trying to manufacture anything. All it's trying to do is create an environment so musicians and artists can do what they're already doing, just have a better framework built around them to succeed. Because again, most of the things that impact us we don't see or we don't pay attention to, like the water analogy. So, every city that we've worked in has its own scene or multiple scenes. Vilnius will have hundreds of different scenes. It's a big city, right? I'm sure there's everything from, Elvis impersonators to gore metal and everyone in between in Vilnius. There's Elvis impersonators everywhere. And whatever music your label's doing, like, what? Yeah, well, or varied genres, obviously. Like, the thing is it's about taking that one step removed and looking at the infrastructure, right? And that is the city's responsibility, and investors in the city, whether it's Go Vilnius, whether it's those who own land or who are developing land, business owners, and so on, right? And the city. What happens after that? That's for the scene, right? It's like we may get one, there may be a big commercial success coming from Lithuania. There may not. It doesn't matter. It's all about every artist believing that this city cares about what they're doing and treats them with respect in whatever they're doing. And that a lot of that has to do with stuff that happens behind the scenes that most people don't see or pay attention to. And that's what the Huntsvilles of the world are working on. But, Huntsville has, again, every city has a scene, I promise. The most famous and oldest black male choir in America is from Huntsville. They're called the Aeolians. They've won a bunch of Grammys. They're awesome. They started in like 1940 something. Little Richard was born there, hated it, moved away, but he was born there. But I'm sure some of you have heard of Muscle Shoals. Anyone heard of Muscle Shoals? So it's okay if you haven't. Muscle Shoals is a town outside, close to Huntsville. There's two famous studios, Muscle Shoals and Fame. That's where Respect was written, R-E-S-P-C-T, Rolling Stones, Wild Horses, Otis Redding, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Allman Brothers, were all recorded there. There's a Netflix documentary called Muscle Shoals, which you should watch, it's amazing. That was like 70 miles down the road. And one of the biggest problems with Huntsville was everyone cared about Muscle Shoals and no one cared about Huntsville. And a lot of the artists in Huntsville were like, we're a scene too. In the city, and we also did the music strategy for Muscle Shoals. But the city wasn't trying to manufacture anything that you can't manufacture. It was just trying to create infrastructure to support, artistic creation. Who knows if we're going to get another famous artist from there? May not. Hopefully. But the first show at the amphitheater was sold out and everyone was very happy. Very happy. Anyone else? Oh, we got one more in the back. It's always that awkward silence. So I feel like we need like music in between when
Hello. I'm interested to know maybe some examples or some advice that you could give for places that, cultural places that, let's say, are at risk of being closed due to the development of the property development, and how could government, help with that? Because let's say in our situation, we have a culture venue, and it's going to be the building is going to be demolished for a ministry town to be built in there, and so basically the building belongs to the government, and in such case, it's not someone privately, owning the property and they kick you out, but this is actually the government.
Oh, well, lots of governments kick people out of things. Well, there is a policy that can be advocated for, which is called like for like. So if you have to move, whoever's forcing you to move provides an alternative space. There's a planning policy that you could advocate for. We call it like for like. It could be called something different. Often this is down to relationships, and sometimes relationships do break down when there's us versus them or culture versus development. I really struggle because I wish I had this, if I had this answer that solved every problem, I'd, probably be able to buy a better pair of shoes. But I truly think that this is made worse because of a lack of data and a lack of understanding. It's made worse when people are arguing when they don't know what they're talking about on both sides. And it's made worse when there's a lack of genuine understanding of the total value of culture and music in a place. So it's like, oh, your venue, oh, you'll be fine. You can go somewhere else, or the city will be fine without you, which isn't true. I think that, but I've learned that, fighting doesn't tend to work. Negotiating tends to work better. And whether it's the government or a private developer, again, developers are not bad. Developers develop. Developing is good. We need things to develop. There's a lot of really good developers. Like, these aren't just people who are sitting there, and they're human beings as well, who can be spoken to and articulated. And also, one of the things I have learned is often what matters to a landowner, whether it's private or public, in terms of how they feed up the chain to meet their obligations, is something that we don't understand. How real estate works, how it makes money, what the potential rate of return needs to be, all these kinds of things. I think we just, I don't have a simple solution, but there are lots of examples of people working together. in Nantes in France, there's a great cultural hub called Trampolino, which is in the island. If you've been to Nantes, like the city center is like an island. It's an old factory that was supposed to be torn down, and it was city owned. And a group of people put an economic case as to why the city would make more money keeping it there. And then it's turned into a big cultural hub. There's also a really good organization called Trans-Europol. Have you heard of Trans-Europol? That is like a network of old buildings that are cultural centers that have a lot of data around how their members have articulated their value, I guess. But yeah, and without knowing the specific situation, it's hard, but I hope that was helpful. Like, you know, the most important thing, if you're being kicked out, then it's really important to then advocate for a replacement, right? If you're being kicked, if you go out of business, fine, right? If a place goes out of business, whether it's, that sucks, but businesses are businesses, right? And some go out of business, and that sucks. But if you're being kicked out because the building is being redeveloped and it's not because of your commercial situation, then I would argue that it's in everyone's best interests to find a suitable replacement venue, right? It seems like it would make sense, but again, I'm speaking in a general way because I don't know, but like, obviously if there's any way I can help after, I'd be happy to. Oh, one more. I have to remind everybody, please don't go until you've checked out the books.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Raimondas from Night Economikos Association. And one question from your work about data.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have some data, for example, how many music venues has to be, for example, around 100 citizens in city, or 500,000 and 1 million? How many live venues are profitable or need to be, or something like that?
Well, we do have some data about the amount of venues per person, but there is no sweet spot or number. If I told you it, I'd be lying. Like, Vilnius, what works here, right? So it could be one venue. Like, you know, I think the most venues, this was last calculated in 2020, right before COVID, 2020, 2021. And it was only 100 cities, I think, and big cities. And the most venues per capita was in Melbourne in Australia. And I think it was one venue per 9,500 people, 10,000 people, something like that. Does it mean that Melbourne is a thriving music city? I don't know. Like, Melbourne has challenges like any other. I would argue more about understanding the nuances of the venues in the city, right? And through your office, having a good understanding of how the venues can work together. Sometimes we see there's a lot of, one of the things that we have seen loads and loads of places is the best way to get the government to avoid you and to not care is for you to argue amongst yourselves. So the more that you're arguing amongst yourselves or disagreeing, or music or night economy doesn't have a single voice, that's a perfect example for the government not to care. That happens everywhere. And so we found that the most successful places when it comes to music venues or nightclubs or whatever are the ones that have a deep understanding of how they make sense in their community, but also how they can work together to support each other more. Because it is an additive business for the most part. Especially in a market like this, again, it can get complicated if a market is dominated by one company, which it is in many places, or, you know, and then it becomes more difficult where it's the one company, you can pick the company, versus independence, right? And that becomes a bigger challenge, but even that, through negotiation and understanding, can be overcome. We just, you know, I work with that one company all the time, but I also work with independents. So both have to work harder. but there is no special number. No city, I haven't found one of a city that is an ideal music city because of the amount of infrastructure it has. It's a city that knows as much about itself as possible and then makes decisions based on knowing as much about itself as possible. Okay. Can take one more. Anyone else? No? Have to say, I had a delicious bagel today with Mark. So if anyone, Mark can tell where we went, I would recommend it. The bagel place near the hotel. Bagelisti? Yes. Okay. I'm like a bagel connoisseur. I really like bagels. Part of my heritage. So fully recommend it. It was very good. Last.
Are you planning to be in Lithuania more often now since you discovered your roots and you know the language?
That I can speak 2 words, beer and thank you. I hope so, yes. Yes, I hope to come to Lithuania every year, is my hope. Now I'm discovering all sorts of interesting things about heritage and where my family came from. They're mainly from Kaunas. But I'd like to work here more. I like it here. I'd like to come when it's not really cold once. But yeah, I love this part of the world as well. I've traveled to neighboring countries as well, and always lovely. So I hope so. Okay, so on that note, thank you to the Vilnius Night Office. A round of applause for the Vilnius Night Office. And I've said it again, please don't go if you're interested in a book. I'd graciously appreciate it, happy to sign it, tell you all about it if you like. Okay, thank you guys.